welcome to Monday Morning Detective, the podcast. I'm your host, Gino Scala, and this is episode number 58. And it's a situation we've seen over and over again, and it's very sad, and I don't know what they can do to really stop it or control it. But I'm always shocked when it happens. And this latest incident occurred in Florida, where a woman, Brandy Hutchins, had just lost custody of her 10-year-old son to her husband. Her husband flew down from Maine, where he now lives. Apparently had enough of a case to warrant full-time custody with visitation, I suppose, from the mother. Now, this was the mother. This was Brandy's second husband, and she has a daughter from a previous marriage who is 19. The 19-year-old daughter was living with her, as was the 10-year-old son. Well, they go to court. She loses, and looking back now, there must have been signs of her instability, which caused her to lose this child. There are no facts at this point. Whether or not she was using drugs, or she was an alcoholic, or just mentally unfit, mental illness. But in light of what happened immediately after the court case, one can surmise that clearly she was disturbed. After losing the case, and while the father was waiting at the meeting place where she were to drop off the son with his belongings, and then he was going to fly back to Maine. When she didn't show, he contacted the police again. They went to the residence and discovered that the wife, Brandy Hutchins, shot her 10-year-old son, Aiden, to death, as well as the 19-year-old daughter, before turning the gun on herself. Now, this is beyond tragic. I'm sure that people close to this case, family members, friends, who had been perhaps at the court during the hearings, certainly the father, had seen these signs, and perhaps even knowing or feeling that there was a strong potential of this happening. It is beyond sad. If Miss Hutchins feels the need to kill herself because she lost custody of her son, so be it. She has mental health issues. But when you take not one but two children, even though one is an adult child, it's still a child, still your offspring, and to take their lives as well is tragic. It's just tragic. Now, this has been happening since more or less the beginning of time. I realize that. This is not, unfortunately, a rare situation. I remember in California at the beginning of the turn down, the job recession and the economic near depression that we all went through, that an Indian family of 5 was wiped out by the father who was out of work. And geez, could be 5, 6 years ago now. But stories like that are all too common. And if there was an indication that she had this type of mental illness, I mean, again, just to point, I don't know if his point in court for taking the child is because of any mental illness. But if there's a sign of something like that, that has to be considered at the time of the decision. Not to influence the decision. If the decision is to take away the child based on her mental illness, that's fine. But it's in the interim period. For example, if you go to court because you abuse animals, there have been reports of you abusing your dog, and the court finds you guilty of that, they're not going to release you home to the dog and then pick up the dog later. Now, I'm not comparing children to animals or anything of that nature, but the same thought process has to happen here. If two parents are going through child custody, and it is deemed by the court or the judge that one side or the other has this potential of doing extreme violence and harm to either the children or the other party, the children have to be taken out and put in a neutral location, temporarily fostered or some kind of home. And once the dust settles, let's say that happened in this case. Aiden was sent to live with a friend. At 10 years old, he's got very close friends. One of the friend's parents says, we'll take him in. It's kind of a safe spot. The decision comes down, and he is taken, along with his belongings, by the other parent. The parent that loses that child should have no further contact, at least not alone. Of course, you want to see them say goodbye and all that stuff. But the wife going home to this child after losing this decision, that can't happen anymore. Something has to be done while protecting everyone's rights, but the number one person that they have to protect is the child. Clear and simple. And as someone who went through a very, very prolonged child custody battle, very expensive, that did a lot of damage both to myself and to my child and so forth, I can tell you that this is a lifelong issue. And even if the child comes out unscathed physically, as my child did, the mental trauma is lifelong. Now, in this very sad case, Aiden was killed, and as was her other daughter. And this won't be the last time we hear of this type of incident. And again, That's my suggestion. The child has to be removed prior to the decision, and make sure that they are safe. And that'll conclude episode 58 of Monday Morning Detective, the podcast. And we hope to see you again soon with something a little more upbeat. Thank you. Bye-bye.